We're going to talk about some stuff and things. The biggest thing I want to make sure is questions. Ask me questions, ask me questions, ask me questions. I'm not a natural born presenter by any stretch of imagination. I always tell everybody I lack a filter. My filter is 20 mesh on a good day, you know. So if anything I ever say offends anybody, trust me, I don't care. But you're happy to let me know how you're offended. But anyway, I'm a very open book. I like to answer any questions as honest as possible. Days like today are really important for your guys' career as farmers, but usually, I don't know about you guys, I end up more confused than Bruce Jenner after midlife crisis. So what we're going to cover today is, I'm glad that nobody laughed. Geesh, y'all need to lighten up a little bit. That's one thing. I'm not gonna settle for no laughs. All right, we're here to have fun. Farming fun, yes or no? Everybody, yes, farming's fun. And somebody's about to say, well, in years like this, but you got to make it fun, otherwise it's miserable, right? Farming's one of those careers where if you're not laughing, you're crying. Amen. Amen. Yeah. So that's what I'm going to talk today about, is a little bit about how do we prevent crying. Look at that. That was pretty smooth. Didn't even have that rehearsed. Let's talk about where money is going, first of all. I'm going to talk about a biological system, how to manipulate a biological system, how to quantify a biological system in order to not just reduce inputs, but overall improve yield productivity on the farm. That's what we really are designed to do. We're not necessarily designed to be some company where you throw a bug in a jug on an acre and hope that it works, because chances are it's probably not going to. In fact, a lot of presenters here today were pretty consistent about this. I think it's very important to hit on this. I went to the World Biostimulant Congress in Miami, Florida 2 years ago. Every origin of every hippie product on the market in the U.S. started from those companies. It's a group of scientists. There's hundreds of scientists. In fact, I'm the minority, being one of few that actually spoke English, right? I mean, there was these scientists that would stand up on stage, defend a thesis about their bacteria, their plant metabolite, their enzyme, whatever snake oil that they were studying. They would defend their thesis in front of a group of hundreds of their peers and then just get belittled and treated like crap for about a 30-minute stretch of questions, line of questioning, right? These are the smartest brains in the biostimulant world. So again, bacteria, fungi, enzymes, algae, you name it. The smartest brains in the world all in one location. And you know what one consistent thing is? The scientific method is that when you have a hypothesis, right? The hypothesis, healthy soil is important. Yes? Everybody agrees with that? Healthy soil is important. So what we do as farmers is we ignore the scientific method, which is you have to try to prove and disprove your hypothesis, right? As farmers, we just do our damnedest to prove it so that way we can sleep at night knowing we spent our money wisely, and we ignore the disproving part. That's where we're at as an industry. That's not what we do. That's not what I do. I guess I should hit on, I'm an agronomy research and data scientist at BW, so everything to do with numbers, data, bar charts you're about to see today. Let's talk about your money first. Money's pretty important, yeah? I also should mention I farm and I don't sleep. So a row crop farm, I have some cattle because I want to work really hard and barely make any money. And we all go through hell starting December 1 every year with cash flow projections, balance sheets, and your banker going, right? Everybody feels that a little bit. If you don't, you're operating off of cash. Congratulations, you made it. The rest of us hate it, all right? That's what my life looks like from December 1 till now. It's nothing but a bunch of stress. According to ISU, this is how you guys spend your money on a conservative level. So if your banker goes to you guys and they say, oh, this is going to be a tight year, you really need to dial things back, this is what you're going to do. Let's walk through this. Number one, cash rent. How many of you guys are going to Aunt Susie and saying, hey, we're not going to pay cash rent this spring. If we make any money this fall, we'll split you a check. Anybody doing that with their landlords? What about, hey, we want to dial that thing down, 20, 30 bucks an acre. Is that happening? Anybody doing that? I mean, it's rhetorical. The answer is no. I mean, none of us are that dumb to do so, right? That's a lot of risk. What about seed? This is one category that deserves your money more than any other category, including mine. Seed genetics. Have they gotten you guys higher access to a higher opportunity of yield over the course of the last 3 to 5 years even, let alone the last 10? Yes or no? Yes. Seed has improved the top end yield potential for your farm's ROI, no doubt. So whenever I do hear people, including myself, I got to look in the mirror when I say this, complain about seed prices, if there's one category of inputs that deserves more of my money on a per acre basis, that's probably the one. Because it's the only category that's actually improving my opportunity for yield. Make sense? Yeah? But there's no doubt the harsh reality is seed cheap? Cheap or expensive? It's a little pricey, right, Matt? But you can't get away from it. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Are you crawling? I mean, how do you negotiate price? Best case scenario, what? You might get somebody a discount of $5 an acre or something like that. It's, you know what I mean? It's a very tight margin business with not a lot of wiggle room. You're more of a price taker than anything. I don't know what I just did there. What about herbicide? This is my favorite part. Ever since I was 15 years old, I would call around to every one of my retailers and I would bully them and belittle them and pin them against each other. And well, so-and-so's selling harness for this much and you're selling volley for this much. And anybody ever do this before? It's like a full-time job. You basically do it from, again, December 1 to middle of February. And you know how much money you save on a per acre basis? $5-10 maybe if you're lucky, right? So according to this farmer, since the banker said, hey, we got to pull back pretty hard, that herbicide program, that's a one-pass pre-herbicide application. Kind of scary, right? If you have any escapes, do you have any money to spend on chemical? No, right? What about machinery? Here's a fun one. Thank God, you know, corn prices went down, input prices are skyrocketing, and John Deere releases a 500 horse front wheel assist like any of us give a rip. Machinery prices, kind of crappy, right? You got to borrow at 8% interest just to buy a freaking tractor. How many of you guys have ever negotiated the price of a starter for your 4440? No, right? So are you a price taker or a price maker on machinery? Can you hedge your bets on machinery costs? Can you put a put option on a flywheel? I don't think so, right? So those are fixed costs. You got no chance. Costs of labor. I always bring this up. 6% of your per acre budget is labor. That's if and only if you hire one part-time employee for 4 weeks in the spring and 4 weeks in the fall. That's it. One part-timer. Anybody have more mouths to feed than that in here? Probably, or at least a few more part-time help. By the way, that's at minimum wage. Anybody paying minimum wage for their catch cart driver? I don't think so, right? Unless they're on crack. So then we go to crop insurance. Years like this year, man, prices are down. I'm going to risk it, right? I'm going to go ahead and only cover 60% of my crop. That's what we're all doing, right? We want to nickel and dime the crop insurance companies. We don't want to spend that much money, right? No, we all still buy the 85% plus the ECO because hopefully we get it paid out, even though we probably won't. Either way, 2% of your budget goes to crop insurance if you're at 60% coverage. Any of your guys' banker very happy about 60% coverage? The answer is no. Cost of living. Farmer Brad here decided, all right, honey, we're selling the Grand Wagoneer we bought during $7 corn. Take the kids out of travel ball, no more dance. This is a family of 4, and somehow they're supposed to live off of $70,000 a year. Does anybody know what the average cost of living in Iowa is for a young couple with 1 toddler? Do you know what that price is per year? In Iowa. Rural Iowa, by the way, to be specific. $94,000 a year. So if you've got more than 1 child out of diapers, you're probably spending well over $100,000, probably pushing 120, 130, right? Geez, you weird, nerdy agronomist, why are you talking so much about money? This is why. Fertilizer. It's the biggest category that absolutely pisses me off as an agronomist. You want to know why? What's your name?
Alan.
Alan? What's your name? Matt? Okay. We met before. I recognize you because you wear the same hat. Alan, I'm not gonna totally pick on you. But let's say Alan here traditionally spends no money on P or K. This is kind of like my dad back in the day. No money on P or K, nothing but nitrogen and sulfur, barely, right? And applies it all in the fall. And he yields 220 bushel corn. Sound fair enough, right? Matt, on the other hand, he goes to a seminar and hears about how he needs 10% base saturation potassium, 200 part per million potassium, 300 part per million phosphorus in order to pray for 180 bushel. So Matt here drops 200 pounds of potash, 200 pounds of MAP, 250 pounds of nitrogen, and 30 units of sulfur, and he also gets 220 bushel. Anybody see a problem with this? The problem is that it's the exact same damn yield for about $150 an acre more. It's something I run into all the time as an agronomist. You are sharing neighbors right now that are out competing you because their fertilizer bill is $30 to $50 an acre cheaper by pure dumb luck, and nobody knows why. This is the only room for improvement as a farmer. Your negotiation power for all these other buckets that make up your cost as a farmer is gone. Today's modern farming culture, you can't just negotiate for a cheaper freaking Dairy Queen ice cream to lower your cost of living. How many of you guys have gone to Hy-Vee and said, I'm not paying $7 for eggs? I'll give you 3 though, Mr. Cashier. I don't think so. This is the only category you have any level of control. And that's why you're here today, spending an entire damn day in freezing cold steel chairs to hear about it, right?
We don't have too comfortable here.
Well, no. Well, if they're too comfortable, they'll start to fall asleep because this shit's boring. But we're going to make it fun. Fertilizer is fun. To me, it's the most stressful thing in the world, right? I mean, I just got a bill for my liquid nitrogen. Thank God I prepaid. $60,000, woohoo, right? How many of you guys, you get those bills and you want to just like kind of throw up and crawl in a hole a little bit, right? It's a stressful category because like I said, your neighbors are spending either $30 an acre more or $30 an acre less than what you're doing, and you're all probably within 5 to 10 bushel of each other. That's irritating as hell, would you agree? So how can we create the same 220 bushel corn or actually improve the opportunity to raise 230, 240 bushel corn on less overall dollars to get that same yield? Does that sound attractive to anybody? No? All right, let's just go keep wasting money, all right? By the way, this is just a cute little statistic. Was anybody alive in 1954? My dad wasn't even yet, but 35% of revenue, 35% of gross revenue was kept by a farmer. That was your margin in 1954. 2024, it was less than 20%. What do you think that margin looks like in 2026? Boom! I was just going to say, what, negative 10, negative 15, right? It's not looking so hot. Hopefully we all have some paid off ground so we have some sort of cushion to absorb that bad debt when we have a bad year, right? Here's the myth of fertilizer. More pounds equates to more opportunity for yield. Does everybody agree with this ideology? The more pounds of fertilizer I apply to that farm, the more opportunity I have for yield. Anybody believe that in here? You can proudly pop it up. Or what about the higher my part per million, P or K, the higher the opportunity for yield? Anybody in that camp? You're all a bunch of liars. You want to know why? Because you haven't been taught anything different. Let's talk about ISU data. I went to Iowa State for a whopping 2 years. I transferred there from a community college because I'm not rich. And what I learned is that the agronomy industry knows nothing. So essentially what I'm going to get at by the end of this presentation, what you're going to realize is that, well, I guess we shouldn't say the agronomy industry doesn't know nothing. We just don't know something, and that's the problem. The problem is that the data we use is skewed, biased, untrustworthy, but it's the best that we got. Fair? So when I get into some of this data, it is not to offend anybody or make anybody feel, oh man, I've been farming wrong or something like that. There's no wrong way of farming, but you don't know what you don't know until you know it. Yes? Ignorance is bliss. Complacency is bliss, right? Let's go through the odds here. This is a probability of a yield response. How is this data conducted? Basically, ISU has these research farms. Anybody ever seen them before? They're kind of cool little setups. They're actually awesome to visit. There's one in Kossuth County that's very legit. And when you go to these research farms, they take soil tests of all these different blocks. And so all that they did to come up with this data was basically say, I applied fertilizer, P or K fertilizer on this square. I did not apply any P or K fertilizer on this square. So what was the probability that that application warranted a yield response? Does that make sense? It doesn't specify rate because, and we'll get into that, but it just says some sort of fertilizer. It could be 200 pounds, it could be 20 pounds, right? But some sort of P or K was applied versus nothing. Here's what's cool. Phosphorus, is anybody in the 0 to 7 category for phosphorus, in that low category? 0 to 7 or 0 to 10, whatever it is. Anybody in that category? You're not willing to admit, but every one of you are somewhere on one of your acres. There's no doubt. In the low category, you kind of in that low teens, 10 to 12. Does that sound familiar to anybody? No, of course not. You all have amazingly high yield levels, which proves my point. If you're in optimum yield levels, can anybody see where that's about at? So if you're at optimum phosphorus levels and you're applying phosphorus for the sake of applying phosphorus, what's the probability of a yield response? Pretty dang low, right? Do you guys ever gamble? We're close to the casino. Anybody gambling here? I don't. I hate the smell of cigarette smokes, and I hate the crowd. Not a good group of people. Anyway, we go to this casino for like the second time in my life, and there's this giant billboard of numbers that show probabilities. Anybody ever seen this? I think it's at the roulette table, the probability of X number or something like that happening. And there's people gambling thousands of dollars on this board for a 60% chance, 70% chance, 80% chance, 100% chance, 90% chance, what have you, right? If you guys were at the roulette table tomorrow and you saw a cute little screen that said, hey, there's a 20% likelihood that number 8 is going to hit, are you betting very much money on it? No, but yet you do every single year with your fertilizer. It makes no sense. Zero. Potassium, very similar. But let's talk about money. Like I said, this is the beauty of agronomy. Most agronomists have a cop-out where we just talk about how to harmonize with nature and whisper to your soil and talk to your plants and try to push yields. That's what agronomists are traditionally known for, not this one. I want to make sure everybody's in business for the next 2 to 12 years, right? Let's talk about ROI. Here's the probability, according to all of these universities right down here. You can read them yourself unless you need cheaters. We've combined all this university data to not just say what's the probability of yield response, but what's the likelihood that I actually make money off the application of that fertilizer. Does anybody see red? Red is not good. So, under the very low category, single-digit phosphorus levels, which none of you admitted to, there is a 50% chance of making your money back on the application of phosphorus fertilizer in the very low single-digit category. Potassium, you're still losing money on 0060 broadcast in the fall. Guaranteed. At the medium category or higher, you are 90% likely or greater to lose money under every soil type condition for P or K. Does that sound like an attractive investment? What if Matt tomorrow, all right, BW comes up with a product, let's just call it Snake Oil 179, all right? Matt comes to your farm and he says, hey, I've got a product for you. It works sometimes. We know there's something to it. Don't know exactly how to use it, where to use it, when to use it. It works about 50% of the time. And better yet, guys, it almost guarantees never pays for itself. Are you interested in the product? How many of you guys are buying that? No? But your retailer calls you every single fall while you're cutting beans and you go ahead and tell them to let her rip 150-50, right? Or 200-200. Right? So, point number one of today's presentation, open up your mind a little bit, because if you held your traditional crop inputs, fertilizer inputs, to the same level of scrutiny and crabby attitude that you hold the biological industry, the hippie, the snake oil industry, you wouldn't spend a single penny on any of that snake oil. The first snake oil to hit the row crop industry in the state of Iowa was MAP fertilizer. Period. Let's talk more statistics. Across 14,000 samples. This is where, anybody ever done soil sampling before? You don't want to, it sucks. But basically, imagine this is a corn plant, right? Corn plant. Corn plants have leaves, so we take a tissue test of the leaf, and we take a soil core from right next to that plant, all around that plant, to measure the soil analysis of that rhizosphere. And then we take a tissue test to represent that place. Does that make sense? To represent that crop in order to measure uptake. Across 14,000 samples of that exact same protocol, where we took soil samples from 7.5 inches surrounding that crop and that crop's leaf. How many of you guys took statistics in high school, college, anything like that? Summer school, maybe, right? So I loved statistics, mainly because I can't do basic math. I still don't know how to long divide. R squared, all that means is the strength of a correlation. How closely knitted are all of the dots to this red line? That's what R squared means. In agriculture, you want a 0.4 or greater minimum, all right? Most people would consider that strong. Anything sub 0.4 is a joke. 0.002. Is that a little off from 0.4? Just a little ways off. You know what 0.002 means? It means that under no circumstance across 14,000 soil tests is there a correlation to higher levels of Olsen phosphorus or Bray phosphorus from your guys' soil extraction correlating to more phosphorus in the plant. Is that irritating? You guys spend money on soil sampling in here? Yeah? Let's dive into this just a little bit. Olsen phosphorus, because you're all going to be soil scientist experts when you leave here today. Olsen, this is Googleable too. An Olsen soil test is extracted using a method that has a buffering solution to only measure calcium phosphate. Once upon a time, tell you a little story, 2018, I decided I'm going to spend money on 3 tons of manure from a certain company, in which case they delivered chicken carcasses, bones, and feathers. How available do you think the phosphorus is in the bones of those chickens when I spread those on the field? Not very available, right? Probably not. That's calcium triphosphate, which is the most abundant compound that you measure when you measure an Olsen extracted phosphorus number. It is completely plant unavailable with no ability to understand predictability of when it is going to be available. What about Bray? Bray is iron, aluminum, and some calcium-bound phosphorus. It's still completely plant unavailable nutrition. So would it make sense if I had a living corn plant right here, and I take a soil test from the base of that corn plant, and I take a tissue test, would it make sense that they wouldn't correlate? It would make a ton of sense because they're not at all available in any way, shape, or form. And again, cannot provide you any way to understand how and when it'll be available. But this isn't to say that crops are raised on well, pixie dust, no pun intended, but fairy dust and hopes and dreams, right? Crops are not raised off of nothing. And in fact, the highest correlation, 0.56, the highest correlation tissue value to yield at R3 is phosphorus. So do I bring up this data to tell you don't ever manage for phosphorus? No. I'm just saying stop being wasteful with your phosphorus dollars. But please manage for phosphorus for the love of God, because as long as it gets in the plant, we got yield potential. Let me ask this question. If you have more pounds of phosphorus or potassium or even nitrogen, if you have more pounds of nutrition in your soil, does that mean that you have a higher potential for yield? No. If it's in the plant, do you have a higher potential for yield? Yes, potentially. Unless it's overly abundant and you screw something up. Let's talk about real life data. Just like every one of you guys, what we do is we do randomized block patterns when it comes to dry fertilizer applications, right? Everybody does this every year? No? Well, hang on a minute. Now, I thought that we trialed everything. We needed a 2-to-1 ratio to Pixie Dust Plus. I thought we needed a 4-to-1 ratio when it comes to BioBoost. I thought we needed a 2-to-1 ratio when it came to Pivot Bio, right? That's what you all tell all of us hippies at these biological companies, but yet you don't trial your P or K. That's kind of weird. It takes your co-op guy about 10 minutes to do this, by the way. So here's our randomized block pattern study looking at different rates of phosphorus, different rates of potassium. In the grid, you're obviously going to see just your traditional soil values, right? pH ranging from a 5.7 to a 7.7, 5.7 to a 6. Are those good phosphorus levels? How many of you guys want to show your landlord that soil test? Probably not, right? Single-digit phosphorus. But then pretty good potassium, right? Phosphorus is kind of in that medium category. Better bump those numbers up. If corn is $7, spend more money, right? Potassium's looking pretty decent. So, this is what we did. Let's look at phosphorus. So, right here is the pounds of MAP fertilizer along the bottom, 60, 75, 105 pounds of MAP fertilizer applied to the field. This one right there, okay? So very low phosphorus levels. Let's take a look at what happened. All right, so first of all, as we applied more pounds, what happened to our cost per acre? Duh, right? This isn't factoring in 8% interest. But most importantly, what happened to our yield? 185, 184, 182. We actually slightly went backwards, but I'm going to say it's the exact same yield. You want to know why? The guy runs a John Deere combine. Ain't no way that monitor set that accurately, right? So that was, you guys can chuckle. If it's a gleaner, we might as well throw it out. I won't even accept trial data with that. Jeez. So most importantly, we spent more money and got no more yield, right? So is that a 2-to-1 ROI? I mean, every one of you at least have the desire to hold a gun to my head and say, guarantee me some bushels with your guys' foo-foo product, right? Yes? You all want to, but yet, here's this. It ain't ROI whatsoever. What about potassium? 0 pounds of potassium. And again, guys, we got good levels of potassium, but remember, they can always be higher. We had better apply removal rates of potassium. We wouldn't want to mine our soil Anybody ever hear this kind of garbage before? Well, here's your potential. Not only is it going to cost you more money, it's going to cost you a significant amount of bushels. In fact, almost about right around 10 bushel difference between 0 pounds of K and 130 pounds of K. So we applied 130 pounds of 0060, 80 pounds of 0060, and 0 pounds. If this is your farm, ask a question. Would you rather combine 188 bushel or 179 bushel? Bueller, anybody? Amen. Probably the 188, right? ROI is just a little bit better than 179. But better yet, you spent money doing it. That's terrible. So not only did you spend money, but you lost bushels from spending the money. Why would this happen? Number one reason we identified in this particular instance, this guy is really struggling with available calcium in his soil. And an overabundance of potassium applied ahead of a corn crop induces a lot of stock integrity issues, right? We end up with smaller stalks. We end up with more crop stress, more water stress, actually, because the structural integrity of that crop is compromised because there's not enough calcium to support the high level of potassium. So, point being, would this guy have been better spending his money on Pell Gypsum or maybe some calcium chloride or one of those other foo-foo products, those extra bolt-ons? Probably. He probably would have made some serious money off of applying some potash. So let's talk about this. Banking your nutrition. How many of you guys bank your nutrition? All of you. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I can't go to my Home 40 and punch in a PIN number to get 20 more units of phosphorus out this year. Can you? I didn't think so. Banking nutrition is one of the dumbest concepts that's ever hit our industry. In fact, any moron that recommends to you guys to bank your nutrition is just that, and it's a moron. And here's why, and I will proudly and boldly state that. Most of you are going to bank your nutrition under two premises. Number one is stewardship, which is a good point. We want to make sure that we leave this ground in better condition than when we found it. Yeah? Number two, we want to leave this farm in a better condition for the next generation who's going to take this thing over. Is anybody in that camp? Either one of those two or both? Very respectable attributes. But I'm about to explain to you why it makes no sense. So, if you're just banking your nutrition, you're applying it anyway, just like I showed right here. What about this guy? He's just fine on potassium, goes ahead and applies potassium, loses bushels. What would have happened if the yield would have never went down? What would have happened if we would have applied these P&K studies, never lost a single bushel of corn, and we just banked our nutrition and spent the money anyway? If you had 30 years left of your farming career, anybody have 30 years left? We got one. Jeez, there we go. I was going to say, years like this, usually that crowd gets older and older because they're like, well, oh boy, I don't know if I can afford to not, right? 20 years, 10 years, you kind of see the graph there. Again, back to money. Money's pretty dang important. Is money important to build a legacy as well? You guys just told me you want to leave the ground in better condition and your operation in a better state for your next generation than when you had it, correct? Yes or no? Nobody's going to say no to that. If you do, go to church, you know? What if you invested that same amount of money that you just blew on unnecessary fertilizer, you just put it into a stock mutual fund or some bull crap that earns 8% interest? Not very good, right? How much money would you have? If you have a 30-year farming career, like I do, because I'm already tired and I'm only 26, I hope my kid's old enough by then to go ahead and buy me out because I'm over it. Anyway, $5.6 million. 5.6. Let's just round it down to $5 million. Would $5 million be pretty nice to have at the end of your farming career? Let's talk about what you can buy with $5 million. This is pretty important. Pattern tile. That's not important at all, is it? You are in north central Iowa, people. Is pattern tile important, yes or no? Yes. The most depressing day of your life is when you go and you combine your pattern tiled 80 and it is rocking and rolling at 260 bushel. Then you go to the South 40 where your grandma will not spend a penny on any tile. And what is that yield difference? 60, 70 bushel at a time, and you just want to kickstart a landmine. It's the most irritating, most depressing thing you'll do all fall long, right? Pattern tile is important. What if you could pattern tile 5,000 acres? By the way, this was quoted to me at 40-foot centers, 4-inch tile. That's pretty intensive tile program, yes? Would that be a better investment in your soil than 4 more part per million phosphorus? Probably freaking so. What about 250 acres, cash money at $20,000 an acre. How would you like to be that guy that shows up to the auction and just smacks it down on the table and says, I got 20 grand an acre for that quarter, it's mine? It'd be pretty nice, would it not be? Is 250 acres paid off a pretty good or important legacy to leave behind to your kids? Maybe. So is that 4 part per million phosphorus still have the same value for your legacy and for your next generation as 250 acres paid off? Probably not, right? Let's get some humor. 50 brand new Denali 1-ton farm trucks. 50 of them. Brand new farm trucks. How awesome would that be? Huh? Well, it's one a week, exactly. I mean, I don't know about you. My dad's still rocking a 1999 Chevy Suburban with a broken AC and no CD player. The radio only gets AM 540. But he could have 50 brand new Denali pickups had he learned this stuff sooner. You could buy a private island in the Bahamas, that one specifically. I wouldn't recommend it if you don't want to have allegations. It is discounted because it's in close proximity to a certain island you definitely don't want your children near. All right, we finally got some laughs. Jeez Louise, wake up. Let's talk about this efficiency of your dollar. This is according to University of Illinois. All that they did was they applied the nutrition you guys apply every single year, year after year. UAN, anhydrous, urea, AMS, ATS, potash, MAP, orthophosphate in furrow, you name it. What they did is they said, how many pounds that I'm applying to the soil right here is getting into that plant in its applied form, and how much of the remaining nutrition did that crop uptake in the unapplied form, meaning that that fertilizer was tied up and remineralized, or there was fertilizer coming from somewhere else in the soil and get mineralized into the available form. What they found, roughly it's about 20%. 20 to 30% of what you apply synthetically actually gets in the plant in its applied form. Pretty cool investment. Works 30% of the time. You guys ever seen that movie, Anchorman? 60% of the time, it works every time, you know? Fertilizer works as good as the youth of America, okay? If it is misapplied, it only works whenever it wants, all right? This is being recorded. That's great. All right. Fertilizer, let's talk about this. Fertilizer, I just told you, works as good as youth of America, which means it's 50-50 shot if it does, right? And it's usually overpaid and overpriced. I can only say that because I am the youth of America. Kind of, still. I'm one more year to 30. I'm going to be scared. Anyway. Although it's nearly useless, I should say when it's misapplied or misused. That's what's most important. Fertilizer itself is the most efficient way to get that nutrition in the available form to your soil solution. Does anybody know how many inches of rainfall it takes to solubilize 150 pounds of MAP fertilizer, 150 pounds of OO60 KCl potash at 50-degree soil temp? So when you guys are rocking and rolling with anhydrous, you're spreading on this 150-150 blend. How many inches of rainfall does it take to get all of that into solution in the soil and incorporated to 4 to 6 inch depth? Throw out some guesses. You people are boring me. Come on. 12. 15. 20. Half. Half an inch. Half an inch of rainfall is it. So if you're like my dad, back in 2012, he bought about 200 pounds of dry MAP, 250 pounds of potash on a really piece of crap farm of ours because we're trying to turn it around. Long story short, rained a lot. He came back to do soil tests, and the co-op guy just couldn't figure out why we applied all this fertilizer and the part per million did not change. Didn't change by a single ppm. Anybody ever experienced this before? This is within months of each other. It's the most frustrating, irritating thing in the world. And here's the reason why you can't track it. That extraction you're using on that soil test is measuring a tied up form of nutrition. It's not measuring all of the tied up nutrition. There is a more tied up form of nutrition in your soil that's the inevitable end result of most of your fertilizer applications. If you are applying fertilizer today without an active living root system to uptake it, you are guaranteed to waste it. Guaranteed. Synthetic fertilizer is the most efficient way to apply nutrition, and it is the most efficient way to lose as much money as possible if you apply it improperly. Timing, placement, form, best practices, you guys all know them. It sounds logistically unfriendly. I always tell everybody, if you could take whatever you think or feel like you need, which I hate feelings, take some dang soil tests and find out. But if you feel like you need X amount in the fall, I promise you could take whatever that is, drop it by a quarter or a third of the rate, top dress it at V4, and get better results from that than fall applied. And unless you're the one applying the fertilizer, you shouldn't give a rip about anybody's logistics but your own. Can I get an amen? So if you're spending money on the fertilizer, use it well. Otherwise, don't. Let's talk about what's happening. We apply our fertilizer, works 100% of the time, guaranteed. We increase the amount of available nutrition in the soil. What happens is that as it's available, it gets tied up into this extractable pool, which I think is a really lousy name for it. But this is where your Bray or your Olsen test is measuring tied up forms of phosphorus or potassium or what have you. And next, you have this XRF pool. What is that? We're measuring every bit of nutrition that's in your soil. In Iowa, on average, is about 4,000 pounds of phosphorus in the top 6 inches of soil, 15 to 20,000 pounds of potassium in the top 6 inches of soil. That's the truth. So I don't want to hear a single excuse today about mining your soil. Trust me, you're never going to in your lifetime. This requires microbial activity in order to mine it back out. This requires freeze, thaw, chemical. This is one thing. I always say this, thanks Obama, we have emissions and stuff and less acidic rains. That's why you guys are applying more and more sulfur, right? Well, less and less acid rains also leads to less and less mineralization of this pool getting into the plant available pool. This pool is accessible via acids, or which can be from root exudation or acid rain, or physical weathering from things like tillage. If you are reducing the amount of tillage on your farm than you used to, we're experiencing less acid rains than before, and we're not maintaining crop health all season long, we are going to access very little of this pool during the growing season. So, how do we get access to this pool? How we get access is enzymes. We need a crop to capture sunlight, uptake CO2 and water, and then create compounds like sugar or other carbons to exudate them into the soil, feed our microbes. Those microbes crap out enzymes, and those enzymes make unavailable nutrition available. Does that make sense? It makes these guys available. So we get to tap into an unused pool of nutrition we otherwise wouldn't use.
Didn't someone say earlier that the year is 2026? We're using 100-year-old fertilizer. We need to figure out the new age, the mechanism to what he just said.
Amen. We got a coworker, and he'll always, every presentation, he's like, hey, have you guys heard about that new phosphate product that Nutrien just came out with? Hey, do you hear about the new potassium product they just came out with? Oh yeah, neither did I. It's been the same crap for literally, I don't even know how many years now. I'm not that old. Anyway, let's talk about this. Number one concept, higher yielding corn is healthier corn, yes or no? Nods, come on, yes? Yes, higher yielding corn is healthier corn every single time. The healthier your corn, the more photosynthesis it produces. More photosynthesis, the more sugar it pumps into that soil. Therefore, the more measurable, stable carbon we have. This is a very simple concept you guys have seen. If you've been here before, you've probably seen this before. Higher yielding corn right here, 223. Higher yielding beans the very next year at 63 bushels. Lower yielding corn, where I trialed a really piece of crap hippie product. It was a free product and went backwards in yield. My soybeans suffered by quite a bit, right? Difference of 12 bushels is probably a lot of money going into this next year. Raise conventional beans too, so that's like a little bit of money. Then what about here? 100 bushel beans. Anybody ever combine 100 bushel beans before? Joke's on you, these were probably 120, but I also run a John Deere combine, so we probably left some on the table, right? Blew them right out the back. We had a solid cover crop. But 256 right down here, what did I do? What did I do? I had 30 years of CRP. Corn was $7, and I couldn't give a rip less about pheasant eggs, so I moldboard plowed that sucker and I planted corn, right? Just like almost any common sense person would do ahead of $7 corn, right? Hopefully I'm not that evil of a person. So I rocked and rolled. You guys have all seen this. Boom in yield where we had that CRP. Why? I mean, as you can tell by now, I'm pretty dumb, but I'm not dumb enough to fertilize a grass patch, right? What happened? CRP, the beauty of this, you have multi-species crops. When it's stressful in June for this crop, it's perfect conditions for the next grass species right next to it, so on and so forth. Next thing you know, you have a constant exudation. You have plants that are constantly capturing sunlight, converting it into energy, and crapping that out into your soil microbiome. And what that does is feed biology to create enzymes, to create self-sufficient nutrient replenishing system, as well as improve photosynthesis altogether. Here's the results. Just like you guys, I have a soil probe and soil sample bags in the cab of my tractor when I'm doing tillage in the fall. Everybody should. I was inline ripping at 3 miles an hour. Here's the CRP after my beans. Here's the high yielding corn. Here's the low yielding corn. Anybody see a difference in this thing called WEOC? What the hell is that? Stevie Wonder looked at this chart and said that he saw a trend. WEOC is higher when you have higher yielding corn. I got a smirk and a chuckle. You people. I know prices suck and whatnot. You got to liven up a little bit. All right. WEOC, what is it? It stands for water extracted organic carbon, doesn't matter. All it is it's a stable fraction of carbon that is readily available for bacteria and fungi to consume as a food source. But notice as I say it's stable. It's not necessarily just sugar, it's complex sugar. It's not amino acids, it's proteins, right? It's things that it's carbon that's going to sustain into the growing season and feed microbes. Does that make sense? This is the fuel for your system to access more of that unavailable nutrition. Right here is biological respiration. Does anybody see a trend? As available carbon increases, what has happened to biological activity? Does it also increase? Probably just a little bit. You've all seen this. Anybody ever apply manure before? Poop makes corn green. Simple as that. Why? This is a study out of China. Some people call it China. In China, what they did is they used the exact same amounts of NPK minerals to raise a crop compared to the identical amounts of nutrition, but derived from a manure source, meaning there was carbon involved. What happened? Yield, year over year, consistently increased. Meanwhile, the synthetically applied nutrition ended up plateauing for yield. Has anybody ever been here before? If you have fields that don't have access to manure, you are all in this camp. Promise. More pounds does not equate to more bushels. Here's why. In its essence, right here is turkey manure, right here is hog manure. I want to explain one thing. Poop has carbon in it, right? Very, very important. Is it important for uptake? Sure, but it's most important to feed microbes. Right here, turkey manure, hog manure. This is pounds of carbon per ton if it was all converted to dry, right? The least amount of carbon from any manure source that I researched is found in hog manure. So what you have all experienced, if you are hog manure producers, what you have experienced so far is you applied 2,000 gallon the first time you had a hog barn, yield went up, so you applied 4,000 gallon, then you applied 6, then you applied 8, and now you're pulling soil samples from the farmyard to send in to Iowa Select, so that way you can apply more gallons and get 12,000, 14, 20,000 gallons out on a field, yes? I don't work, well, this is being recorded, so yeah, mind it. Don't raise your hands, but we've all been there. I don't work for the NRCS, I don't care. Here's the thing. An over application of nitrogen, this is a big, big deal. One thing you're going to learn from me before you spend a single penny on product, when you leave today, one thing you have got to understand is how to be efficient with your nitrogen. Measure what is necessary to measure and be as efficient as possible. If you are applying in 2026, for God's sake, if you're applying a 0.9 NUE or higher, you are over applying, guaranteed. There is some other management strategy you could develop to get the same amount of pounds out of that soil and not actually apply it synthetically. Because for every pound of synthetic nitrogen you apply, you lose 5 parts carbon if it's non-utilized. If that nitrogen is unutilized, you burn up 5 parts carbon for every pound of nitrogen. So get efficient with your synthetic nitrogen. If you are over applying synthetic nitrogen, whatever you think you are doing from a regen ag perspective or from a soil health perspective will be completely negated and you will never know a shit bit of difference. Promise. Seen it, been there, done that. It will not work. Nobody cares about that. This is the most important slide of your life. Want to know why? Because it's real data. Anybody ever seen this data? Then we're moving on. I'm moving fast. What? Yeah. No, I shut it off on purpose. Anybody ever seen the data where it's like, I think it's really cute. There's like sales reps that'll cover like a 6-county radius, right? And they're like, here's my 260 to 300 bushel category farmers, and here's my 240 to 260, and here's my 220 to 240, and here's my 200 to 220. And here's the part per million and the pHs for each respective group. Anybody ever seen this kind of crap data before? You all have. It's all shit. Here's why. It involves no relativity. You're Matt. You're who?
Alan.
Huh? Alan, I knew that. Alan here sprays 2-pass fungicide, Y-drops twice, and applies spring UAN. Matt here applies fall anhydrous, doesn't spray any fungicide because he thinks it's snake oil, and doesn't believe in traits. It's all conventional corn. Half the time it falls down. Are those two people managing corn differently? Probably. So is the part per million or is the soil attributes a cause or are they an effect? Are they really, again, relativity, is it fair to say that you have the same yield potential as you under those circumstances? No, management's entirely different. This is why I get disgusted with this industry. We try to oversimplify it to try to make it palatable, and I'm not going to do that. You're going to leave here more confused than you've ever been, hopefully. Here's the statistics. Across 50,000 acres, this is the probability of a yield correlation, meaning that R-squared value is 0.4 or higher within a field. Everybody's got their home 80, right? You got one field right here. What we said was, according to all of our soil tests, we overlay our yield data. We look at that average yield represented by that soil test, and within this field, was there an R-square valued above 0.4 for every soil metric on our soil test? Does that make sense? If it was a 0.4, it's a tally. 0.4 or higher. It's one tally. So this is the probability. How often will you see a higher yield from these soil metrics within a field? Is that fair enough? That's how you conduct real research. Take a note, ag industry. Ideal pH. Anybody ever spend money on lime before? About to ruin your world. 5% of the time, you will actually experience higher yields where you have a pH between 6.3 and 6.7. Every other pH range outside of that, it doesn't make much of a difference. 5% of the time, 6.3 to 6.7 will have a higher yield. Pretty bad ROI. Who's betting on 5% odds? This isn't to say, you're about to say, well, you idiot hippie kid, I've applied lime before and my yields have gone up, and I'm sure they have because you're applying 220 pounds of anhydrous in the fall and you were low on calcium. We weren't ever low on lime. Your pH doesn't even freaking matter in our kind of soils. What does matter is your calcium. So I'm not arguing that the application of lime might lead to more yield, but it's not the change in pH that's leading to more yield. It's the application of calcium in calcium-limited environments. Make sense? Cool. Part per million phosphorus. This is Bray, Mehlich, or Olson phosphorus. 15% of the time it correlates to yield, but better not mind it. Better make sure we apply it, right? Here's our rating, our phosphorus rating with our soil test. We look at about 12 different metrics, 8 to 12, somewhere in there. 38% of the time, our rating system is correlated to higher yields than just a single phosphorus part per million. This is what's really cool. That big XRF pool I showed you guys earlier, that big pool that we can mine nutrition out of, 42% of the time as we have higher levels in that pool, we'll experience higher yields. If, you might see right here, you have good soil structure. It's a proprietary metric that we've developed on our soil tests in order to understand what kind of soil structure you guys have. If you have poor soil structure, notice how there's no trend to yield. This is one big key point I wanted to make. Go ahead, buy a bug in a jug, spray a foliar product, spray stress mitigation, do whatever the hell you want. If that soil is as hard as a brick road, you will not improve your soil health. You will not improve your fertilizer efficiency. You will not improve nutrient availability. You will not. The first thing you should invest in is tillage. Sweet? Everybody's on the same page? Because the worst tillage is still better than the worst no-till. I can tell you that. So manage for good soil structure first and foremost. Potassium, micronutrients, our potassium rating. Here's our available calcium and sulfur. That's kind of cool. Notice what I said earlier about pH. It ain't the pH, it's the calcium. 60% of the time, as you have higher levels of available sulfur and available calcium, you'll experience higher yields. But here's the most important metric. This water extracted organic carbon, this available carbon I mentioned and I've been preaching about, never matters if your soil structure sucks. You want to know why? Anybody ever have like claustrophobia before? None of you have been in a crawl space and like had to fix a wiring issue or something like that? No, liars. We have to breathe, microbes have to breathe, fungi have to breathe, right? Living things have got to have some oxygen and porosity. If you don't have good soil structure, managing for carbon, using our products aren't going to help you one bit. Don't waste your money. If you have even just average, which is a conventional till system, if you just have a good, okay soil structure, 80% of the time as you improve available carbon, you will improve yield. You will find higher yields where you have higher levels of WEOC, 80% of the time. Is that a pretty good gamble? Yeah? Should we manage for higher levels of WEOC then? Or should we manage for higher levels of phosphorus and potassium? We have twice the likelihood of improving yield on your farm with higher levels of WEOC than potassium, and phosphorus doesn't even stand a chance. Everybody following this? So it's not that this is not important. It's not that this is not important. It's just that this is really freaking important and nobody is managing for it, right? This not only determines your fertilizer use efficiency, but I'll tell you why we experience higher yields. Where you have WEOC, you will have an R-squared value of a 0.94 to biological activity. Higher levels of WEOC drive higher levels of biological activity. Why is that important for yield? Yield is comprised of three things: water, CO2, and sunlight. It is not nutrition. 80% of the CO2 required by a crop for its carbohydrates that make up 96.6% of the kernel you raise and the plant you grow, 80% of that CO2 is derived from biological respiration of the soil, releasing into the atmosphere and your stomata catching it, as long as your crop is not stressed. Is this making sense? So why is this WEOC thing so damn important? Not only is it improving how efficient I am with my synthetic fertilizer dollar, that's an opportunity for some rock solid economics. That's great. Most importantly, I'm improving the opportunity for my crop to create sugar, energy, carbohydrates, and pack that sucker in the kernel. That's what carbon does for your system. That's why soil health matters. Earthworm crap and all of that regen kind of stuff, I don't give a rip about. If water extracted organic carbon is not improving, your soil health is not either, period. Everybody's got that? Thank God. Let's talk about how we do this. Number one, let's talk about how I lost money. Here's my family farm. Bad potassium, okay-ish to bad phosphorus, right? Pretty run-of-the-mill operation. Funny news is this farm has not had phosphorus in a very, very long time, potassium either, and you might say, well, buddy, it shows. Let's see what happens. I took tissue tests. I applied P and K in this randomized block pattern. I applied it 36 hours before planting. I applied it, cultivated it, planted, right? Can't get more efficient than that unless you're going to top dress this stuff. Here's what happened. Wherever I applied my recommendations using our Agronomy 365 platform compared to the high recommendation of P&K, which would be an ISU standard recommendation, I actually had a slight improvement on P&K in my tissue test. Slight improvement. That doesn't make any sense. I applied more pounds of the soil. That's bizarre. Here's what's crazier. Too much phosphorus. I induce a zinc deficiency. You guys have all seen this on your traditional hog manure fields that are sky high with phosphorus. Every year you see striping from zinc. Yes? Or when you guys first started applying starter fertilizer, 4 or 5 gallons of phosphorus, you would start to see this zinc striping. So now you add in a quart of zinc. Yes? You induce a zinc deficiency by over applying too much phosphorus. Calcium deficiency, molybdenum deficiency. Here's the results. We got 0 pounds. Here it is. This is units of P2O5, units of K2O. Following? So higher levels of P and K. What's happening? Let me first draw your attention to the massive amount of money that I lose in order to prove this crap to you fine people. You're welcome, okay? Second of all, my cost of production went up. My yield, in this instance, actually went down. Why the heck would that be? Makes a lot of sense. If phosphorus is highly correlated to higher yields, and higher pounds of phosphorus equated to less phosphorus in the plant, it would make sense that I missed out on yield, correct? Because I didn't get in the dang plant. So I went backwards in yield and then boom, popped up right around here. This is where most of you are at. This is probably what you call your standard practice, your base program. Chances are, if you go to 0, a lot of times what you'll find is actually sometimes an improvement. Sometimes, depends on the situation. You can find out with a soil test. As you apply more in a high function system, what I didn't mention is the WEOX on this farm is very high, soil structure is banging, and when I apply more pounds of synthetic, I get less and less yield until I get to a point where I finally apply enough synthetic fertilizer to compensate for a non-functioning soil. Over application of that P and K rendered less biological activity, rendered less enzymatic production. Therefore, I got less into the plant. Making sense? So the more you apply, you measure low part per million, you over apply your P or K. The more you apply, the more you're going to have to apply. And the more you have to apply, the more salt you're going to have, the worse structure you're going to have, the worse biological activity you're going to have, and you're going to measure a low part per million again, and you're going to apply even more pounds again. That's how this system works. It's completely broken. So let's talk product now. Finally, Matt, he's like, Jesus H, man, we've been here for 7 hours. BioBoost, let's talk about this. It's really important. Why did I lose money when I applied that much phosphorus right there at planting? Boom. Why did my yield go backwards? Why did my tissue analysis go backwards in phosphorus? Why would that happen? It's because the overabundance of phosphate didn't allow for biological association and colonization of the spermosphere when I first planted that seed. That's when that seed first imbibes water and it's pushing out its amino acids, its stored sugar, its exudates, right? And at that point, it's creating a relationship with the microbes. Why we developed BioBoost was to colonize this area right here, and most importantly, bore you all to death. Here's what I mean. Everybody stand up. Serious. That was a heart attack. I'm not going to move on. Everybody stand up. Serious. When you guys all go and try BioBoost this year, and you're going to trial the farm, you're going to split a planter, I want everybody to bend down and touch the middle of your shin. I'm not going to ask you to touch your toes because I know none of us can. Right below your knee. Now, what I want you all to do is reach up about like that. All right, now you can sit down. Those are the 2 time frames that I want you to go scout your BioBoost trials. Here's why. What we do is we colonize that seed with microbes that create a systemic change in the crop. And you will not notice that systemic change. You will be bored to death at 55 miles an hour at V2 to V3. I promise you won't see a shit bit of difference. What you need to do, go back around that shin high time frame. I ripped off the primary root system, meaning that root system that attaches to the seed that feeds a crop for like this much of its life and doesn't matter at all. Piece of advice. Next time you see a stupid advertisement, here's our product versus competitor, or treated, untreated, and that root off of that seed looks fuzzy and beautiful and crazy and sexy, run as fast as you can. Chances are that product is absolute shit. Let's talk about this. Why do I say that? The more energy we put into that primary root system that, again, stops feeding that crop by about V4, the less energy we put into the secondary root system that's feeding this crop from V4 forward. So if 80%, which is the actual statistic, of water and minerals that our crop uptakes is derived from more secondary roots, not our primary roots, but our secondary roots, is it important to develop a product that's going to drive a lot of secondary rooting? Probably. Water's important. Yeah, nutrition, pretty dang important. So here's what it is. It's an inclusion of bacteria and fungi that act as a preventative stress mitigant, but most importantly, hormonally trigger that plant to drive a lot of secondary rooting. You see a huge amount more biomass below the roots. Like I said, Don't go out there at V3 or V4, you'll be disappointed. Go out there V6 to V8, then go out there when you got an ear on the sucker, and you'll be impressed. Here's the beauty of BioBoost that is I would be failing at my job if I didn't mention. We have a microscopic inclusion when it comes to the carrier. What happens is right here, anybody ever eat a peanut M&M before? Me neither, they taste like crap. Anyway, this is your peanut, right? This is our bacteria, this is our biological inclusion. This is our bacteria, our fungi, whatever, food source, doesn't matter, right? Whatever we think we need for active ingredients in this product is stored right here. Right here in this little outside rind there is some protein, and this very outside shell is this hard, call it your hard candy shell. And what that does is it encapsulates all the microbes within that peanut, and it maintains shelf stability and, most importantly, biological life. As mentioned a couple times a day, is delivering live biology. This is the most effective way to deliver live biology. There's a 6-month on-seed stability and a 2-year shelf life with living microbes. These microbes are alive, they're viable, they are readily able to colonize your plant and create that association with your seed. Most importantly, it can sit on that shelf for 2 years, and it can be pre-treated on that box for 6 months. Pretty dang important to be able to logistically use a product. Overall, here's the statistics. That's a stupid little AI picture. I hate it. But here's my actual statistics. I had over 30 trials looking at BioBoost, and I did measurements. What we found was a 22% increase in biomass, but actually about a 4% decrease in internode length, i.e. plant height. What we actually did is we created a nice linebacker of a plant. The goal was to create a product that drives as much rooting as possible as a preventative measure for stress mitigation. You hear a lot about stress mitigation and reactive measures to stress mitigation. This is the most proactive stress mitigation technique you can have, is manipulating the physiology of that crop to have more roots, more biomass above ground, and a larger vascular system. Here's how you do it. 22% increase in biomass, 11% increase in root weight, and an 11% increase in stem diameter. That's the magic. That's how we do it. By improving stem diameter, we increase the size of the secondary vascular system of that crop. Therefore, we initiate more roots for the secondary root system. Does that make sense? So we create a nice girthy stock versus a spindly little crappy one. And we keep that plant nice and short and squatty. One thing I also hate about biostimulants that get used on the seed or at planting that blow up this plant, and this plant looks like this huge, beautiful, gorgeous, like crazy out of control plant. It's 3 growth stages ahead of the untreated check. Again, run. It's probably not going to perform very well. Either that product is going to give you a 12 bushel positive response or a minus 20. Been there, done that, not interested. We want a boring product at that time in that crop's life. We want to raise good corn. We don't want to raise the best corn, but according to Top Producer magazine cover, right? We just want good corn. We want steady corn. We want resilient corn, most importantly, and this is how we do it. Overall, we use it heavily for micronutrients. We've seen a huge uptake in sulfur and nitrogen because our microbes in there are oxidizing things like sulfur, oxidizing zinc, oxidizing iron, manganese, boron, copper. We get this huge increase in micronutrients via biological function. There are micronutrients in the product, but most of the uptake is derived from our biological teams. Overall, when it comes to results, we got an ROI win rate of about 77%. Here's the data here for Iowa, 71 replicated sites, and a 6.25 bushel advantage on corn, 4 bushel advantage on soybeans. Let's talk about the biology even further. There's other ways to get microbes out onto the soil, right? Matt has got liquid forms of our microbes. What's really, really important for me to communicate to you guys is, irregardless of the microbe, one thing that you should be able to ask of anybody is, what enzymes are being produced by the microbes that I'm purchasing? When my microbes consume something from the soil, what enzymes, what compounds are they exudating into my soil solution? We have a guaranteed analysis of enzymes that our microbes will produce as long as the microbes are consuming and pumping out those enzymes, meaning phosphatase enzyme, zinc solubilizing enzymes, potassium ammonifiers that are ammonifying organic unutilized nitrogen into plant available ammonia again. We have a large array of proven capabilities behind these microbes. And what we see from these microbes is a 45% increase in WEOC, and that's where we're unique. Nothing in the biological market is really that unique when it comes to get more available nutrition. It's a tagline you guys have been pitched since 2013 when the biological space started taking off, right, Matt? And I don't know about you, but I'm bored of it. And here's the truth. Almost every product on the market today can get you more NPK, and sometimes they can get you micronutrients. That's true. The other thing that's true is that if they are getting you those nutrients at a cost to your WEOC of your soil, and they are not replenishing WEOC just as much as they are consuming, they are a detriment. So you're going to hear it here first from an agronomist that works at a biological company. One of the most detrimental things you can do to your soil health is apply living strains of microbes. How we get around this? We have proven enzymes that degrade complex carbon. About a third of your guys' organic matter is made out of complex carbon. So all that we do is we apply a society of farmers, right? We have EMTs, we have police officers, we have firefighters, we have good contributing members of society, i.e. your NPK solubilizers. But what happens when they run out of food? They probably don't contribute very much anymore, right? So all that we do is we apply microbes that create a surplus of food. Yes, they have to consume WEOC, but most importantly, they actually degrade those complex carbons in the soil and increase the amount of food available for themselves and everybody else. Just like you guys, they create a surplus. And that's what allows us to improve available carbon over time while maintaining available nutrition all season long. What we'll see is 90-day periods of available nutrition. This is 401 in furrow and meltdown either in the fall or a pre-herbicide application. This is our two main microbe teams. Green is treated, yellow is untreated. This is biological respiration. We definitely, not only did we increase biological respiration, which again is not hard. Any biological product, any dang biological product you guys spend money on, you are going to improve biological respiration. The question is, how long are you improving biological respiration? That's the question, right? Inorganic nitrogen. This is plant available nitrogen your crop can utilize. We increase that all season long. What about phosphorus? Available phosphorus. We jacked it up. Look at that. R3, our plant available phosphorus that were right there at the base of the plant, was sky high. Available potassium also consistently higher in the treated area. Here's on my own personal farm. I do a lot of trials. Here's my grower standard, 233 bushel. Here's our BW standard of 251. Is that a big yield difference? Yeah. What was my grower standard? I did a removal rate of P and K. I did a 1-to-1 NUE. And I did a 624-6 starter at 4 gallons. Sound like a pretty similar situation? Anybody ever do that before? Removal rates of P and K? Yeah. The BW standard, I reduced my P and K by $30 an acre just to justify, more than justify my microbes by about $10 an acre. But on top of that, I reduced my nitrogen a little bit, used 401 in furrow and meltdown on my pre-herbicide pass, and I actually improved bushels. What do you think the ROI is on that? I'm not very fast on math, but that can pay some bills. Good, isn't it? Let's talk about changing your practices. This is a group of 5 farmers that I've worked with in Northwest Iowa, heavy, mucky, crap soil, 20 fields. This is what we've done. We've adopted both microbe teams that we offer on every single acre of their farm, applied some way, shape, or form, broadcast, in furrow, what have you. Then what we've also done is we've managed, like I mentioned to you guys earlier, we've managed nitrogen. We have decreased the amount of synthetic nitrogen. That is step 1 to improving available carbon. Over application of nitrogen can ruin any efforts you make towards soil health, right? Every one of these guys have gotten more efficient on synthetic nitrogen. They've cut phosphorus, synthetic phosphorus, entirely out, and potassium has been cut in half or more on every one of these operations. Catch my drift? We did this from 2020 to 2023. Our average available carbon went up dramatically from 131 to 161. What about our nutrition? Our Olsen phosphorus went down by a whopping 6 pounds. But hang on, I thought we were going to mine the soil, right? Our crop is obviously removing something from somewhere. Shouldn't that be 0? I mean, 2021 to 2023, we got a few crops in there. We started at 23 and now we're at 20. So that's about roughly 6 pounds of phosphorus. That's bizarre. What about our plant available phosphorus? That's what H3A stands for. Plant available phosphorus, 21, and we bumped it to 38. Is it probably a little bit more important to have nutrition available to the crop than just nutrition in the soil? Probably. We boosted availability. What about potassium? What I say, 40% of the time, higher yields will be found where you have higher levels of ppm potassium. Look at what we did, 222 to 244. And we cut our application in half. Our available potassium, we went from 60 part per million to 90. Strides difference when they adopted a biological approach and a lower synthetic approach. This is what a fertility system looks like. This is what a fertility program looks like, not a fertilizer program. Manure Unlocked, I got to hit it because I know Matt's got a sniper on me somewhere that would shoot me if I didn't mention it. And all it is our microbe team is designed for a pit treatment. It's going to break down your solids. It's going to get you a more homogeneous mixture, so you have a more consistent application. Here's my big one. You know what I hate about hog manure? For any of you guys that scout your fields, it is so annoying to me when I'm scouting a 120-acre field and I see weird streaking or weird patterns I just can't quite explain. And almost every time it turns out to be, oh, well, that was the bottom of the pit. That was the top of this pit. Oh, we switched barns, something like that. We've all been there. It happens all the time. And it's because our pits are insanely inconsistent. Just by improving the homogenization and consistency of that pit, we can improve the overall agronomic effects out in the field. That's what matters to me. Here's what we've seen in the pit. Here's the only downside to using Manure Unlocked is you get a lot more available nutrition. So according to the USDA, they're probably going to want you to apply less of it. So I would suggest applying it right before application. 25% increase in nitrogen, 26% increase in organic nitrogen, 60% increase in phosphorus, only about 1.5 in potassium, 42% increase in zinc, and 23% increase in sulfur. Huge amount of nutrient release. Notice how it's very copycatish of our other application methods to the field. We're going to breeze through this. Biological food sources. I just figured I'd educate on this. I've done a lot of studies looking at biodiversity, which is very important. One thing I want to make sure everybody understands, humic and fulvic acids are not biological food sources in any stretch of the imagination. Humic and fulvic acids. Have you guys ever been really hungry, gotten home from work one day and said, man, that drywall looks really good. I'm going to gnaw on that. Anybody ever think that before? No. Humic and fulvic acids are a structural home. All right. A fulvic acid would be like a tent. Humic acid would be like a house, right? They are not food sources. They might improve colonization. They might improve biological activity, but only because you just gave a homeless person a home, not because you fed anything. Okay. That's one misconception of our industry. The next thing is plant extracts, kelp, seaweed, yucca, algae, all these kind of cool, fun things. They all have some sort of unique property that I don't care about. At the end of the day, plant extracts and amino acids, that's where you want to go for food sources. They improve the largest amount of biodiversity, meaning you're getting a lot of different strains doing their thing all at the same time. So you get a lot of diversity of job types. So instead of just having nothing but EMTs and no firefighters, you're getting EMTs, firefighters, police officers. You get the point. The only downside is that sometimes you will drive a plant response to these plant extracts or these amino acids. And if improperly used, sometimes you can get not so good responses sometimes. Just depends. So whatever the heck you're using, just understand what kind of stimulation response you're going to have on the crop and how it fits in your program. The last thing is nitrate. A lot of people will use just UAN to stimulate microbes. It can negatively stimulate some negative biology, but also improve. It'll have very low biodiversity. Sugar, cane molasses, cane sugar, brown molasses, I don't care what it is. Sugar products, 10 times out of 10, will decrease biodiversity in the soil 10 times out of 10. So although they might drive biological activity, they do not equate to more available nutrition. That is a misconception. Just because you feed the microbes in your soil does not guarantee more available nutrition in the soil. Feeding microbes that create enzymes that liberate tied up nutrition will improve your nutrition. Does that make sense? So simply feeding microbes is a hit or miss situation. Worst case, if you're using sugar, you're getting a low biodiversity. And you might be saying, well, I've used a sugar product before and I did get a yield response. That's great. You treated a symptom. All that you did was drive a biological respiration into your crop canopy and improve photosynthesis for a short amount of time. But what if we improved WEOC rather than just simply, what if we cured the problem rather than treating the symptom? Last thing I'm going to talk about is reactive stress mitigation. This is very, 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 very important. A crop under stress is a crop that is not feeding your soil. Hear that? If your crop is under stress, it is conserving all of its energy as it can for itself, and it is not pumping out any carbon into that soil. If your goal is to improve soil health, to improve available carbon, to improve available nutrition, reduce synthetic fertilizer, and improve your opportunity for yield, you have to mitigate stress in your crop. This is why people say fungicide is going to pay 8 out of every 10 years, irregardless of disease pressure, because you maintain a healthy crop. Make sense? So maintain crop health. Relax RX, it's nothing more than a product designed to boost herbicide metabolism. When you spray a post herbicide, anybody do that? None of you spray herbicide around here? You spray post? Anybody spray post? Yeah, if you spray post herbicide, you're going to delay rooting by about 7 to 10 days. So all this is designed to do is to get that plant through that stressful time frame and continue to grow its roots rather than stalling out that root growth for that 7 to 10 day time frame. The last thing is foliar nitrogen. Again, great way to reduce the amount of synthetic nitrogen being applied to that soil to allow you to start boosting your available carbon in your soil. You can utilize foliar nitrogen. We developed this simply because we wanted to have the most efficient nitrogen foliar applied to a crop, which is amino acids. Does anybody know how many pounds of nitrogen are in a bushel of corn? 0, you're right. It's just protein, that's all it is. And amino acids are a prerequisite for protein. So all that we did was get a high concentration, high quality amino acid package, paired it with some micronutrients that help with nitrogen assimilation, and boom, we've got a product that's also going to mitigate stress and readily supply that crop with some available nitrogen. Therefore, we can fill that kernel. That's all I got. Here's what I'm going to leave you guys with. At the end of the day, we've got a lot of fun crap, but I wanted to hit on this. Whether it's product or practice, a fertility program adopts both practice and product, right? No single product is going to be a magic silver bullet to improve your soil health. No single practice is going to be a magical silver bullet to improve your soil health. Soil health is not important in any stretch of the imagination if you're not leveraging your soil health. It doesn't benefit you to have a healthy soil if you are also not reducing inputs and raising higher yields, correct? So you don't get a premium for having a healthier soil. What I want everybody to leave here today knowing is that it is worthwhile chasing a healthier soil, but most importantly, managing around it and for it to try to optimize some serious ROI. Your guys' fertilizer budget, your fundamental agronomy, has always been focused on get your NPK right, and maybe if you guys are real creative, get your base saturations balanced, whatever the hell that means. You spend all this money doing that crap, get your pH perfect, and you know what you end up with? About the same dang yield. What I want you to do is I want you to adopt a fertility budget. We have a tool called Ferticast, but Ferticast is a mindset from BW that it's not found in a product, it's not found in a practice, it's found in both. That by adopting both, yes, synthetic fertilizer, although I've painted it as a pretty evil picture, we recommend a lot of synthetic fertilizer to a lot of people. Using synthetic fertilizer, most importantly, properly and efficiently, mitigating stress and optimizing my crop growth conditions, and adopting a high-functioning soil with good soil structure, whether that's tillage, cover crop, I don't care what it is. But I adopt a high-functioning soil practice. I have now adopted a fertility program. So I want everybody to leave understanding there's a way bigger difference in figuring out what you're going to spend at the co-op for your fertilizer than what your fertility program is. Deal? Cool. Hope everybody's more confused now than when they started. And I'm glad that only a couple of you nodded off a couple times and nobody actually snored. Happened once. Is there any questions at all? You're that bored. All right.